Her name was Ava Carter. She was 33 years old. And in her mother's world, that single fact had slowly turned into a quiet, growing nightmare. Ava lived with her mother in a modest house on the edge of a small suburban town in Ohio. The house wasn't falling apart, but it wasn't warm either. It carried the kind of stillness that comes from years of unspoken worries. Pale walls. Simple furniture. A front porch her mother swept every morning as if cleanliness could somehow silence gossip. From the outside it looked like an ordinary home. Inside it was full of prayers that never felt answered. Ava was educated, responsible and independent. She worked as a program coordinator at a nonprofit organization, handled her own expenses, and helped with the household bills without being asked. She cooked dinner most evenings, drove her mother to appointments, and made sure the house never felt neglected. But none of that mattered. Because Ava wasn't married. And to her mother, Maria Carter, that absence outweighed every achievement her daughter had ever earned. Maria was 61. With silver hair she died only when someone commented on it. Her eyes carried permanent worry lines now, the kind that no amount of sleep could erase. Once she had been known for her laughter, loud, warm, comforting. Neighbors used to come to her for advice, recipes, and comfort. Now they mostly came with questions. Every morning before sunrise, Maria sat on her prayer mat long after the house was quiet. Her hands trembled slightly as she raised them, repeating the same prayer she had whispered for years. God, please don't let my daughter's life stay incomplete. Please protect her after I'm gone. Please give her a future I don't have to fear. To Maria, future meant marriage. Not romance. Not love stories. Not companionship. Marriage meant safety. Marriage meant social approval. Marriage meant that when Maria was no longer alive, Ava wouldn't stand alone in a world that loved judging single women. Ava understood this better than anyone. She saw it in the way her mother's shoulders stiffened whenever weddings were mentioned. She heard it in the sudden pauses during phone calls with relatives. She felt it during family gatherings, when conversations circled around her like a spotlight she never asked for. In the beginning, the questions were gentle. So Ava, seeing anyone special? Any good news we should be expecting? Then they became sharper. Is she too focused on work? Is she too independent? Maybe she waited too long? Eventually, the politeness disappeared altogether. At this age it becomes difficult, an aunt once said casually over tea. You should have settled her earlier. Maria smiled. She always smiled. A polite, fragile smile that collapsed the moment she turned away. At night, when Ava was asleep, Maria sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. Sometimes she cried quietly. Other times she simply sat there exhausted, replaying every decision she had ever made as a mother. Ava pretended not to notice. That was how she survived. Ava had learned early that her silence made things easier. She didn't argue. She didn't justify herself. She didn't explain that she wasn't broken, unlucky, or waiting to be saved. She simply lived. Proposals had come over the years. They just never came with respect. One man wanted Ava to quit her job immediately after marriage. Another expected her to move states away and care for his parents full-time. One family asked about children before asking about her dreams. There was one proposal Ava would never forget. The man's mother had leaned forward, smiled thinly, and said, "She's decent looking, but 33 is late. We'd be doing her a favor." Maria had nodded politely. Ava had felt something inside her quietly break. That night, Maria cried harder than Ava had ever seen her cry. "I should have done more." Maria sobbed, clutching Ava's shoulders. "I failed you as a mother." Ava wanted to scream. She wanted to say that failure wasn't the right word. That society had simply made rules no woman could win. That a ring didn't guarantee happiness. That marriages could be lonelier than solitude. Instead, Ava held her mother and stayed silent. Years passed like that. Ava's birthdays stopped feeling like celebrations. Maria baked a cake every year, but her smile always looked strained. She stared at the candles a second longer than necessary, as if wishing time would slow down or reverse itself. One evening, Ava came home from work and immediately sensed something was wrong. The house was too quiet. No radio. No cooking sounds. No comforting routine. Maria sat at the dining table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Mom," Ava asked gently, "are you okay?" Maria hesitated before speaking. "Your cousin Rachel called today." Ava felt her chest tighten. Rachel was younger. Married. Pregnant with her second child. "She asked why you weren't at the baby shower," Maria continued. "She said she hopes you're not lonely." Ava swallowed. "People talk," she said softly. Maria looked at her then, truly looked at her. "I'm not afraid of people," she said suddenly. "I'm afraid of what happens to you when I'm not here." The words landed heavily between them. That was the first time Maria admitted her deepest fear out loud. Ava felt tears sting her eyes. She wanted to say that loneliness wasn't the worst thing a woman could face. That dependence could be more dangerous than solitude. That she was capable, strong, and not incomplete. But none of those truths felt strong enough to fight a mother's fear. Another proposal arrived weeks later. The man lived out of state. Stable job. Decent background. Maria allowed herself to hope again. She prayed longer. She slept less. Then the conditions came. Ava would need to leave her job. Relocate immediately. Focus on home life. That night, Maria sat on Ava's bed, her voice tired and fragile. "Just this once," she whispered. "Make a small compromise." "I'm so tired, Ava." Ava cried quietly, her face buried in the pillow. "I can't erase myself just to be accepted," she said. 2 women cried that night. One mourning her values. The other mourning the future she feared her daughter would never have. Outside, the world continued without pause, judgmental, impatient, loud. Inside the house, Ava lay awake long after her mother fell asleep. She wondered when a woman's worth turned into a deadline. When love became pressure. When mothers began measuring their success by their daughter's marital status. The porch light flickered softly. Maria slept with dry tears on her cheeks. And Ava remained awake, holding a silence that was growing heavier with every passing year. The change didn't arrive with a dramatic argument. It arrived quietly. On a Tuesday morning, Ava was halfway out the door for work when she heard a sound she had never heard before. A dull thud followed by silence. She turned back. "Mom!" No answer. Ava ran to the kitchen. Maria was on the floor. Her face was pale, her lips trembling. One hand clutching her chest as if she was trying to hold herself together. For a moment, Ava forgot how to breathe. The ambulance ride was a blur of sirens and shaking hands. Ava sat beside her mother, gripping her fingers so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Please," Ava whispered over and over. "Please stay." The doctor later called it exhaustion. Severe stress. Anxiety built up over years. Her body finally said no. He explained gently. "She needs rest. And peace." Peace. Ava almost laughed at the word. Peace was something neither of them had known for a long time. That night, Maria lay in a hospital bed, smaller somehow. Fragile in a way Ava had never allowed herself to see before. Tubes and wires replaced the strength Ava had always relied on. Ava sat beside her, listening to the steady beep of the monitor. "Amy," Ava said softly, her voice barely louder than a breath. "What scares you the most?" Maria's eyes filled instantly. "That when I'm gone, you'll be alone." Ava swallowed. "I am already alone sometimes," she admitted. "But I'm not helpless. And I'm not incomplete." Maria turned her head slowly and looked at her daughter. Not at her age. Not at her empty ring finger. At her tired eyes. Her steady posture. Her strength. For the first time, Maria saw what Ava had been carrying. Not shame. Responsibility. Years of shrinking herself so her mother could sleep at night. Maria's lips trembled. "I thought I was protecting you," she whispered. "But I was suffocating you." Ava closed her eyes, tears slipping down silently. They both cried that night. But for the first time they cried together, not against each other. When Maria came home, something shifted. Not suddenly, not perfectly, but noticeably. When relatives called and asked about proposals, Maria no longer lowered her voice. "She's fine," she said simply. "She's doing well." When Aunt Sophia hinted again, Maria smiled and replied, "Comparison doesn't raise daughters. Confidence does." People were confused. Some were offended. Some whispered. Maria didn't care anymore. She was tired of measuring her motherhood by society's approval. Ava noticed the change in small moments. Her mother slept better. She laughed more easily. She stopped sighing every time a wedding invitation arrived. One evening, as they folded laundry together, Maria spoke again. "I spent years begging God to fix you," she said quietly. "I didn't realize you were never broken." Ava's hand stilled. She didn't answer. She just leaned her head on her mother's shoulder. Weeks later, life did what it always does. Surprised them. Proposal came. Not through relatives. Not through pressure. Through chance. A colleague introduced Ava to Daniel, a widower in his late 30s. Quiet. Thoughtful. No dramatic promises. No conditions. On their first meeting, Daniel said something Ava had never heard before. "I don't need someone to complete me. I've lived that myth already. I just want someone who chooses me." Not because they're afraid of being alone. Ava didn't rush. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. And for the first time in her life, no one pushed her. Maria didn't pray desperately anymore. She prayed calmly. God, let her choose peace, whatever that looks like. Months passed. Ava made her decision slowly, carefully. Not because of age. Not because of fear. Not because of her mother's anxiety. But because of respect. When she told Maria, her mother didn't cry from relief. She smiled with pride. Not because Ava was getting married, but because Ava was choosing freely. The wedding was simple. No loud celebrations. No pressure. No whispers. Just quiet happiness. And as Maria watched her daughter stand tall, confident and calm, she realized something she had never understood before. Marriage didn't save Ava. Ava saved herself. Later that night, Maria returned to her prayer mat. But her prayer had changed. God, thank you for teaching me that my daughter was never incomplete. It was the world that refused to see her whole. And Ava, she carried something lighter now. Not a husband's name, but a life that finally belonged to her.